Hey, welcome to Creative Block. I'm your host, V. I interview people in creative industries about their life, work, and hobbies while we doodle jam. We ask people on Twitter if they had specific topics they wanted us to discuss, as well as some drawing prompts. And today with us, we have Adam Henry and Jeremiah Cortez. Hi.
Hello.
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 Thank you guys so much for coming on the show. I'm really excited to interview you guys because you were EPing on Dogs in Space, and you both have like a really interesting story in animation and how you both met and came to that project together. So I think I'm just gonna start by asking the both of you kind of like growing up, what was your relationship to animation, and did you always know you wanted to go into animation?
Um, I'm the older one, so I'll go first, Jeremiah.
Mm.
I kind of went to school originally for computer science and lasted 3 months in college and then switched to liberal arts. And then I just kind of meandered for a bit and left New York and went to San Francisco and tried to become like a comic strip artist, editorial cartoonist, all these sort of things where I could just work at home and make $1 million. So none of those panned out, and so I went. I said I got to go back to school for this, and it was a million years ago, but it was a great time to go back to school. So I went to CalArts in 92, 93, 94, which was kind of one of the early golden ages of animation where there was more jobs than people at the time. So I went to school there and kind of got into my first gig on Iron Giant right out of school. I didn't even finish school at the time. They were so desperate for people. But growing up, I didn't really know about animation because I grew up on the East Coast, and I didn't like Disneyland and Disney and animation. I was kind of out of my radar until one day I saw the book Illusion of Life, and I like devoured that book. And from that point on, I was sort of like, oh, that's a thing. So, but I always drew. I was actually grew up as a musician. My dad was a Broadway musician. I went to like the Fame School briefly in New York City. So I kind of started in music and then transitioned to art.
That's interesting because that's you already had all the sensibilities that were like very important for animation because I feel like there's a very strong tie between musicals and animation.
Oh yeah, especially when you get executives and say no more musicals.
That's funny. I feel like my perception of animation, or at least being in the industry for 10 years, I feel like I've heard the opposite where it's like, can you sing? Can you write music?
Yeah, I've heard both sides of it, definitely.
What about you, Jeremiah? What was your path into kind of animation and like your how you thought about it? Did you always know you wanted to go into it? What school did you attend to?
Yeah, for me, it was always animation. I grew up with nothing but cartoons. My dad kind of introduced me to, what was it? Like Rocky and Bullwinkle and Charlie Brown and cartoons like that. And he kind of taught me like the step-by-step how to draw those characters. So, you start with the basic giant shape, you start breaking it down to smaller shapes, and there you go, you drew Snoopy. And it was in learning that that's how animation or cartoons worked, was just a bunch of people drawing a billion drawings and making it move on screen. And once that kind of like clicked in my head, what animation was and that's something people can do for a job, that's kind of where it all started. And it was always wanting to start a show or create a show, and so that's all I did was just study every cartoon out there I could, figure out what they're doing for the story, the animation methods, the style, and I kind of just kept going. So it was very much any kind of art class I could take in high school. I took when it came to college. I started in community college first, and it was very much, let me take all these animation courses or anything even resembling anything in the field of animation. Let me take those classes. Some of them I took like 3 times over. And it got to a point where my instructors were just like, hey, we taught you everything we can. There's nothing else here for you. You got to move on. You got to go to a private school and get out there. And so, they pushed me to do so. And I went to Laguna College of Art and Design. And there is where I got my degree in animation. And then after that, it was just working on this pilot for dogs. It kind of just, was a little hobby of a project.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of pitching a show and getting a show produced right out of college without any experience in the industry yet was, extremely unreasonable to think that would happen. So it was very much just a fun pitch Bible I was putting together with the intent of actually, if I ever had the chance to pitch it, it would be ready to go. I just knew it was unlikely. And it took about 2.5 years to finally finish it. And that was the pitch Bible, some animatics, some crude animation just to kind of show how these characters can move around. Being that they're so tiny and stocky, how could they possibly work in an action scene? So I did some crude animation to show how fast they can move and whatnot. And with my friend Ray, we wrote the theme song, which is the theme song you guys hear on the show now.
What? That's so crazy.
Yeah, we were in garage bands for, I don't know, like 17 years from high school, into adulthood. And, I continued to pursue animation, and he went to school for music. And so I reached out, I was like, hey, I want a theme song ready to go for the pitch, if I ever pitch. Just to kind of give them the feel of what this show would be like. And yeah, he wrote it up, and we put in the pitch content, and they liked it enough to where not only did they keep that song for the show, we were able to bring Ray on as a co-composer on the show as well.
Oh, very cool. And so did you after you went to college, did you have did you start pitching right away, or did you also look for like a first animation gig? How was kind of like that timeline for you in terms of like finishing up school? Also, like how long did you spend in community college versus
With community college, I stayed way longer than anybody should.
What does that mean?
Jeez, I must have been in and out of community college for about 7 years or so. I
think that's really great to know, because I feel like often when we hear interviews, people will say like, oh, I did this step and this step and this step. And then it feels like, oh, that must have happened in just a couple of years. But like hearing that you went for 7 years, I think that's like really interesting. So yeah, thanks a lot for like talking about that and kind of like exploring what that was like.
Yeah, it was something, I don't know, maybe it was a combination of just like being a little complacent and at the same time, really making that effort to learn what you can while you're there. And, it was very much community college, so I didn't have to pay my tuition. You fill out your forms and, and I was set. The idea of going to a private school and actually having to pay the tuition to go there was kind of a big scare. I was like, there's no way I could afford going to one of these fancy schools. At least I had the opportunity with the community college to get whatever I can learn here. And I think it was just some kind of a level of not feeling fully prepared to actually go out there and apply for these jobs. I did a little bit while I was in community college. I tried out for storyboarding on The Simpsons, and then I applied for I did a test for Family Guy as well. Back then it was all paper, there wasn't a whole lot of Storyboard Pro yet. So you would do this huge stack, you would put it in this big folder, and you'll drive down to the studio and drop it off in person.
Oh wow.
Yeah. But yeah, I would not recommend taking as long as I did to get out there. Um, yeah, it was just more like a safety net, just staying within those classes and not really going out there to try.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, once I did,
Was it would you say it's like if it weren't for your teacher you wouldn't have taken that step
I'm pretty
toward
sure I would not have. They really did. They literally sat me down and said, "Hey, you got to move on." And I was like, "Yeah, cool. Maybe I still want to learn a little bit." Or they kept asking, like, "What do you want to do? What do you want to do?" And I was like, "Well, be an animator or a storyboard
Mm,
artist." And it was like me playing it safe, like not playing it safe, but more playing it realistically.
mm,
Um, and they were just, no, I don't think that's right. They kind of like were almost a little disappointed in that answer because they're like, you're a
mm,
storyteller. You have so many of these comics you draw in class. You have so many stories you tell us all the time about these ideas of shows you would want to make.
mm,
You're a storyteller. You're not just an animator. And they kind of pushed me to kind of believe that as well in myself. It's like, okay, fine. I don't think it's possible for me to be, to go right out there and start, working in story. But
mm.
if that's what you guys really see, then I'll try.
Mm. That's really interesting. And for you, Adam, do you feel like because you started as an animator and then you went up the ladder and went into directing. Do you feel like you also had this, because you said you also did comics, so you had this impulse to do more story rather than like just design or sticking to animation?
I mean, I always liked story, but in the '90s, animation was like that was the coolest job, and that was the job that there were the most people in, because it was still, they were still doing a lot of it here, and there was, Disney and
Mm,
Warner Brothers that just started up a whole division. I was like the third or fourth artist hired at Warner Feature. They did,
mm,
She-Ra, not She-Ra, sorry, they did Iron Giant and Quest for Camelot and Space Jam, the first Space Jam. But
mhm,
2D died in the late '90s, and it was everyone had a choice. You could either go and be a CG animator and continue animating, or you go into story. Were kind of the two main choices. And I love to draw still, and I was like, oh, I can still draw, if I go into story,
yeah,
and it seemed like really fun. So that
yeah.
was like in the early 2000s, and so I wanted to keep drawing, and again, and I loved story, and it seemed, uh, you know and my first sort of storyboarding jobs, I was basically animating, and they're like, yeah, you don't need to do that
Mm.
many drawings, buddy.
You were like, that's so funny because you were like, because there's a lot of conversation in boards that it's like the technology made the board artist animate.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a little bit of an inkling, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that because when animation became uh, primarily CG, a lot of the animators who love drawing went into boards. So there's not only just the technology, but there's also a lot of people, and I have a lot of friends who were animators and now board artists who just miss animating a lot.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We all kind of gummed up the works of storyboards, I think, by drawing too much in there. Because when I first started, like, I remember seeing boards for whole 11-minute shows that were like 300 panels, or 400 panels.
Mhm.
It was like crazy. Now you see like 2,000, 3,000 panels for a show. It's gotten somewhat out of hand.
Yeah. And that's like a just like a technical question. Would you say that for you guys as EPs and overseeing every single step of the way for an episode, when you have a board with a lot of panels, do you feel like it helps the process in terms of like editing and whatnot, or do you feel like it makes it more work for the editor and just actually having to take out panels? Like, what's your feeling in terms of like the amount of panels that you get now per episode, or like.
I think it's interesting. When I started on Loud House, I'm still a little bit leaning towards more panels than less, and more acting than less. But when I got there, they said, the showrunner at the time said, you don't need to draw a lot of poses. Jam Filled, which is the Canadian studio that animates Loud House and has been animating it for the last 6 seasons. They add all that stuff, and I was kind of surprised because most of the TV shows I've been on, like, what you send is what you get back. So if you send one drawing for 3 seconds, you're going to get one animated shot for 3 seconds. But so it kind of depends on who your animation studio is. So it definitely varies. And, and there's different shows, like a Family Guy show is basically a character layout show. You are drawing every single pose, blink, action in there. Kind of. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
No, like even when I was applying for a Family Guy, their whole thing was the storyboards have to be on model, like on model. You practically have to trace to get that kind of accuracy and whatnot.
Yeah, something that I've heard for like a lot of adult shows, like for example, Big Mouth, or Simpsons, or there was another one I forgot, but like I guess Family Guy 100%, where like you pretty much have to trace, and the level of clean that's expected, or at least now, is like the drawings are almost, you could almost just kind of like color them in, and it's like a final frame.
Right.
And here's my thing, like, most shows now are done through Toon Boom. There's not a lot of straight 2D shows where they're drawing on paper. Like She-Ra was the last one that I worked on that they actually in Korea were drawing pencil on paper. But these are all like built models in the computer. Why would anyone draw it tight? They're not using your drawings to get the model right. So it always still kind of confuses me why anyone in a Toon Boom show would worry about anything other than proportion and
right. Yeah,
preach.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're mainly rigs at this point. So why does the boards have to be so accurate if you're just gonna plop in a build that's already proportioned and correct in its size and everything?
I wonder if, I don't know. That's something that I'm like, I mean, maybe like one day I'll manage to get a guest who like works closely with that pipeline, and I'll be able to get answers. But my speculative guess is, I wonder if there's maybe a thought of like skipping over some designs, like calling out designs. So actually, maybe this is something that I haven't really talked a lot about on this podcast, but and you guys can like talk about this in more details because you're EPs. Once you get the boards approved, and then you're going to be calling out designs and special poses. Kind of, what are you, how much do you delegate to the lead character designer to call out these poses, and what kind of specific poses do you want to call out for design?
Yeah, I mean, on Loud House, it's definitely a process. And again, it is a little different because it's a show that's been around so long and they know the characters well. But it's all on the art director, like, at least for me. She picks the ones that seem extreme and she thinks they need help on. And that's the thing, the art director kind of knowing the overseas studio and what they're good at, what they're bad at, what if you send it, it's going to come back wrong, or what they need, what extra help, where do they need help? And so they just go through the whole board and pick out the special poses for the character designer to do. So I'll see it at the end, but it's really, if you got a good art director, a good character designer, just get out of the way.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And how was that experience like on Dogs in Space, like from boards to design?
Oh, it was hell because Jeremiah is at heart a character designer, as you can imagine. Kidding, I'm just kidding. Well, Jeremiah, you can speak to that because Jeremiah was in charge, basically, along with Adam Bernier, of character designs.
Yeah, with character designs, what do I want to talk about? Yeah, it was as far as the character designs are concerned. When I was pitching this thing and getting the pitch Bible ready, I was aware that I watched like the pilot of Steven Universe, where it was they were a little bit more detailed, they were more atomically correct in some ways, or closer to real. And the lighting was a lot darker, a lot more like spotlight lighting on the characters and whatnot. And then you get the actual show, and they're a lot more simplified. The details have been really toned down, and they're more animation friendly. So I knew that that was a possibility. That hey, I could try to make it look like what I want it to look like initially, as far as like what I was doing prior when it was just like this little comic book and a sketchbook. Or I can just get it to a animation friendly stylized version. And so from the beginning, I did have that in mind, and I had these characters ready to go as far as being animatable. And just working on this idea for 2.5 years, you had a lot of concept art that I was building up. And so going into it, there was already a lot to work with. So, I worked pretty closely with the art department and with the character designs. And just, it didn't become this thing of like trying to figure out what the shape language or what style we wanted to do it. And it was more just dissecting why I draw these characters the way I do, dissecting like the rules and mechanics of how to get characters in this specific style and shape to animate. Where do you have overlapping lines? When do you ignore overlapping lines when they should be there? Just the anatomy of them, we had to go into, even in the animation, going into squash and stretch. These characters in the beginning they were a little bit more gummy. They were, they had that squash and stretch bounce to them, but it was like having to say, no, these characters have bones. So you have to really think of these characters with skulls and whatnot. So you can't, if you're going to have them zip around or move really quickly, you can't stretch their head. You can't bend the forehead because there's a skull in there. If these guys can't reach the top of their heads, they cannot reach the top of their heads. So you see in some of these episodes, I think even in episode 1 in the pilot, normally you would have a character bring their index finger to their ear, and then they start talking through their comms. In this show, none of these dogs can physically reach their ears at all. So we still have them do that action, but they're just touching the side of their cheek. But it still works. Like, people still register what they're doing. So we had to figure out workarounds like that. I know, Adam, you remember, like, Chonies is the most simplified, simple character, but he was the most, like, challenging when we went into animation.
The simpler, the harder it got for them to animate the character.
Yeah.
Because Jeremiah's style is very graphic, and so the less sort of points of sort of volume that you have, the trickier it is when you're going so graphic. And Chonies was so simple, it was hard to turn. And Jeremiah spent many nights redrawing Chonies for the overseas studio.
Yeah, they would. They would send us, the animation would get dailies, and then from there I would screenshot, whatever scenes or poses or whatnot, and I would just have to red line on top, like, oh, his eye wouldn't be where it's placed right now, or it wouldn't have this weird shape, or it would actually overlap the head at this point, at this angle. It would start overlapping the head, or just keep it behind the head. It doesn't make sense, but it'll look right if we keep it behind the head for this pose or something like that. But yeah, Chonies was a hard one. Even down to like the last couple of episodes, I was still redlining Chonies animation. Other characters, the animators got a handle on. I had less red lines for them, but Chonies was pretty much all the way to the end.
That's really interesting because that means that you were kind of also taking on the would you say like redlining animation is usually kind of lumped into the role of a supervising director or an art director, or like are those roles similar? I guess it's a question for both
I would,
Adam and Jeremiah in terms of like kind of defining these roles.
Yeah,
I
we
would
kind of
imagine,
we,
yeah.
we
Go for it.
split up duties on that. Yeah, I said duties. So like Jeremiah, obviously being character design, genius, he did all of that. When animation came back and they needed some drawings to sort of fix their animation, or for me to explain to them what was needed, Jeremiah could have done it, but like I said, you split duties when you're running a show. So I did a lot of the animation fixes. So that's kind of how we split. And those are usually the two things that come up for redlining, is either a character design fix or animation.
That's really cool. Like I kind of want to also ask you guys a little bit more about now that we're talking really production of like Dogs in Space. How so Jeremiah, how did you kind of pitch to Netflix, and then how did they partner you up with Adam, or like how did you guys' partnership happen from the pitch until meeting and like going forward together on the show?
A lot of money crossed palms, man. I should tell you, it's Hollywood, baby. No, it was a very sweet tale, right, Jeremiah?
Yeah, I think so. What happened is, I stick my stories a little backwards. So once I pitched to Netflix, which is its own story in itself, and they gave me the phone call saying, "Hey, we want to buy it." I was like, "Okay, cool. What do we do now?" And they said, "Well, first you need an agent. You need some kind of representation. You got a week." So, normally you would have already representation, and they're the ones who are,
I was just gonna ask you, how did you get to pitch to Netflix without rep?
My friend Ray, my friend who wrote the theme song, he was at one of these. He attended one of these. I don't know, Mother and Me, Parents and Me things where you just kind of sit around in a circle with your newborns.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what those things are called, but he was at one of those. He met a guy there, Brandon Hung, who was a executive at Netflix who took pitches for family animated content.
That's so cool. We actually have Brendan. We've interviewed Brendan on the show before. He's like one of our early episodes. That's so interesting. Cool. It's so cool.
Yeah, no, he's a cool guy. We still do karaoke together.
Oh, nice.
But he was just like, "Hey, I met this guy, Brandon. He works at Netflix and takes pitches and stuff. Do you want me to let him know you have a show to pitch?" And this was like maybe a couple weeks after I completed all the pitch material.
Wow.
And it was very much, well, I have the pitch bible, animation, spec scripts, character designs. I even had like character turnaround charts.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to a point where I was just like, if I do anything more, it's overkill.
Right.
I covered my bases. I have everything to show that I know how to do this, because I knew very well if I did get the opportunity to pitch this, my lack of industry experience was going to hurt me. So let me do samples of every, department of what a production would be, just to kind of show them I know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I finished, it was just, okay, well, let me move on to working on something else, because I'm not going to pitch this thing. No one's going to take my pitch. And so Ray let me know, hey, I met this guy. I was like, yeah, if he wants to look at it, sure. And a couple weeks went by. Ray's like, hey, I talked to him about it. He said he'll look at it, but it better be good. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm ready. There's nothing else I can do on it, so let's do this. And he gave me his email. I was like, an executive giving you their email for a pitch, like, he's just, at this point I'm like, okay, he's just being polite. He just gave me an email. I don't, it's gonna get buried within his emails. He's an executive. He's busy. He was just being nice. I got an email. So I sent it all. I was like, okay, well, it ends there. And about 2 weeks later, Netflix called, said, hey, we want you to come pitch in person. Would you want to do that? I said, cool. And so I went, pitched in person. And then after that, it was the same thing where I was like, well, that was nice. At least I got to see the Netflix building. That's cool. And I went back to my day job as a forklift driver and crane operator. And
sidebar, crane operator. I heard that's really hard.
It's dangerous, yeah, because I had to deal with 2-ton bags of like glass beads, or titanium, like titanium white. It was like this chalk at that point. It was all a bunch of different pigments and stuff that we would dump into these giant bins, and that would go into the conveyor machine of like, we would produce the material that you would use to, you add water, you mix it around, but we would make the pigment paint that you would use for on the traffic streets. So the white and yellow that you would see on the road, that's what we produced. So, I'm dealing with these giant ton bags, and I have to move them over whatever respected bin that they're supposed to be assigned to. And then on the bottom of that bag, I have to untie it and make sure that it pours within this tiny little hole on top of these giant containers.
And all that with the crane.
So my hands are underneath 2 tons, and at any moment, these bags could give out. I could lose an arm. They've told me stories like this. Yeah, it's happened to people here. It's just like, oh crap. There's stories. So it was a pretty demanding job. But that's what I was doing when I got the phone call that they wanted to buy it, and I was like, oh, okay, sweet, But I'm pretty much a big researcher guy. I like to just cover my bases. So when I was in the process of developing the pitch, it was, let me research how to pitch. Let me research, how other shows did it, as far as, I read The Art of for BoJack, Adventure Time, Steven Universe, and a bunch of other films and stuff. And a lot of what I was reading in there was, we got development, but we don't have the green light for the show. Adventure Time, I think they had the pilot done, but then Nickelodeon didn't want to air it. And so Pendleton War, I think it sat on the shelf for a few years. I think it was 3 to 4 years until they actually were able to show it. And then they found a workaround because they legally couldn't show it on YouTube or anything because it was property of Nickelodeon, and if they don't officially air it, then you can't put it out there on your own. So they found a way to sneak it into Nick at Night, and they played it there, and so legally it's been played, so we can now post it, and that's how the show kind of got an audience following, and that's how that got made. But
wow, I
knew that getting the show bought for development didn't mean anything. So when they said, oh, we want to buy the show, I was like, okay, cool. And I think they were expecting me to be a little bit more excited, but I just didn't want to because it's not a green light yet.
Right.
But yeah, they told me find a representation. I had a week. I found Gotham. I went with Gotham. And we kind of just talked about what the process was going to be. Netflix is going to have me meet with writers to find my head writer. And they're going to have you meet with executives to co-showrun with you. And so Netflix is like, well, we'll get a bunch of people together and we'll have you interview and see what clicks. But prior to that, Gotham said, hey, we got a guy, Adam Henry. He's really good.
A guy.
Yeah, we got a guy. and he's really good. We think you'll work well with him, and he has the material. He likes it. He's very interested. We want you to meet with him. I was like, cool. Let's do this. So I met with Adam at what is it? The commissary.
Yeah, in Glendale.
Yeah. We met there, and it was just like his demeanor was just already okay. I kind of understand who this character is, and I sat down with him, and from what you can tell from Adam's voice and cadence, is very much he's a very soft, warm-hearted kind of character, and just talking to him, and he just went on and on about what he loved about the pitch material, and all he started talking about what he wanted to do with it, and where the possibilities were, and where the heart was, and it was in that passion of knowing what I was trying to do with this show, rather than it just be another cartoon where it's just mayhem ensues all the time. There's a heart to it. There's a very sweet heart of they're just dogs and they just want to go home.
Yeah.
And in those meetings, when I've met a lot of people, and immediately you meet Jeremiah, and right off the bat, you're like, oh, this guy's sweet and sincere. But I knew I was selling myself to Jeremiah. I wasn't selling myself as because a lot of people could have helped him make the show. But, what was important, I thought, was like, how well are we going to get along for the next 2 years? That's more important because, the creative chops are there. But if the relationship isn't there, it's just going to be really painful.
Yeah, and how did you kind of figure that out in an initial meeting? Do you guys have like questions that you like a specific set of questions you like to ask, or is it just kind of like you're just looking for a vibe?
I mean, I'm kind of a give me like 30 seconds with anybody, and I can tell you right away how I feel about them.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, you're psychic.
I'm immediately judgmental. So for me at least, I knew right away. I kind of got Jeremiah really fast. I mean, there's some people that you can't read, and they're just always going to be this sort of opaque sort of character for you, even if you know them for years at a time. Like I've known, some development executives like that, where it's like nothing I say or do can kind of break past that sort of poker face wall. But Jeremiah is not into any of that, so that was refreshing.
Yeah, I feel the same as like what Adam's saying as far as reading people. I feel like I could get a person down really fast, and it was just I don't know. I'm pretty sure I knew it was Adam instantly. It was very much that kind of just a vibe I got from him. And
how many people? Oh, sorry for interrupting. Did you meet up with a lot of other people as well?
I did. What happened is I met with Adam. We talked for a couple hours there, and then I went home. And then I think it was like the next day, because this was later in the evening. From what I remember, at least. But I told Netflix, hey, I found my executive. We just need the head writer. And Netflix was just like, well, that's the first person you met. Let's really have you meet with people. We got a list of people. Let's just do that. And I was just like, okay, fine, it makes sense. Maybe I just got a little excited and just wanted to start the show or something. I don't know. I was just like, okay, cool, let's do that. And I met with quite a bit. I want to say it was close to like 9 different people by the end. And a lot of them were great. There was some that were close, and I know they had the excitement, but they didn't really latch on to the heart as much as I would want, other than, rather than just really being excited about the comedy of these, astronaut dogs. I really wanted to make sure the heart was kind of like the main focus. And so there was a little handful of people that I really, really liked, but it was very much like, man, Adam was just on it. Like that connection is just, I'm not really feeling that level of connection with all these people.
I feel like you go into those meetings and it's sort of like, leave your ego at the door.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, I think a lot of people in those meetings are trying to like either impress somebody
Mm-hmm.
or, play a game
Mm-hmm.
or just sort of, say, look at me. And I'm like, don't look at me. You're paying me to make someone else's show. When you pay me to make my show, then yeah, look at me. But for me, it was always like, even though we collaborated, really 50-50 on this show, at the end of the day, for me, it was always Jeremiah's show that I was trying to make, not my show. Although it became our show, but still.
That's actually something that I feel like we haven't really covered a lot on this podcast is having someone like you, Adam, who comes in and helps out with shows. Because is that was that the role you also had on Shira, Princess of Power?
It was under very kind of different circumstances. It was actually my first like job where I was managing 20 or 30 people, and it was Noelle's first opportunity to obviously to run a show, because I think she'd only been a writer before that. So I think there was definitely growing pains in there in that show, and kind of I love it because everything I need to know to run a show now I basically learned on She-Ra. But they set it up a little oddly. DreamWorks is a little weird in that, at the end of the day, Noelle was the EP and I was the supervising producer. So
yeah, I was wondering about what that title meant, and is there like a hierarchy like that comes with that title, comparing that to EP, or like kind of what does supervising producer means?
everyone's different. Like again, like on Loud House now, we have an EP, Mike Rubiner, who's been on the show from the beginning, and he's the head writer. So I see him as the boss, but he's not making it. He's not making the show day to day. I'm making the show day to day. So, to me, I'm the showrunner on Loud House because I'm the one every day at 9 a.m. I start answering everyone's questions. And then Mike jumps in, at the sort of the big points during the show. So basically, we're kind of making the show along with 30 other people, but kind of the buck day to day, the buck stops with me. And on She-Ra, that was kind of the structure, but again, I think because Noelle and I were both new at it, it was a little messy.
Yeah, that I mean that makes sense, and that's something that is like that I kind of want to shed some light on for like the audience in terms of like usually it's very, very rare that there's just like a single person who's at the top who's like show running. Usually there's like a couple people, like I've heard of shows where it can be up to like maybe like four and then everybody kind of splits their finds a way to split where each role ends and like begins and ends. Yep. I guess somebody's like more design, somebody's more writing, somebody's more, I don't know, boards, and then it's kind of like figuring out that flow, I guess.
Yeah, and I think you need that. You need someone in charge. I think people want someone in charge, and someone who really knows everything that needs to be done and on a show. I know on Three Below, the DreamWorks show, they used to joke because they had a showrunner, but every time Guillermo del Toro walked in the building, they said it cost them $1 million because he would just look at everything and just make them redo it. So it really varies from show to show what supervising producer is, but to me, it's generally the person that's running the show day to day.
Oh yeah, that's really interesting because it's something that's like, I'm excited to hear that you have like all these different experiences, and like, would you say that for you it's been different on every show, right? Every time that you've been like a supervising producer,
right. And I mean, I was co-EP with Jeremiah on Dogs. So in a way, that was kind of all the shows I've been on, that was the one I had the most control over. Mostly because we were, pretty much always on the same page, and we just kind of did things hand in hand. Or I did things, that were kind of more, production related. So Jeremiah could be more on the creative side at times. But like on Loud House, I'm sort of the final word on art and story and animatics and everything. Everyone kind of looks at it, but I have to sort of approve it before it ships, basically.
Right. Yeah, you're the final approval before anything ships.
Right. And the one they kind of count on the supervising producer to catch everything, so that before it
Mm,
ships, there's nothing that's going to come back wonky or blow a lot
mm,
of your budget on because we didn't send it out right. So you're really trying to make sure all the creative is exactly what it needs to be before it's out of your hands for 14 weeks while it gets animated in, Korea or the Philippines or Canada.
hmm. Do you did you have rep to start kind of like stepping into these roles? Like, did you have rep prior? I'm guessing you have rep
I
now.
do, yeah. I had natural talent. And then no, it was a good 2 years, but then I got a job that they had nothing to do with. So, and I was able to extricate myself and save 10% from that.
Mhm.
But then I guess it was at Shira that I jumped back into having representation, or just after. It was
Mm.
just after Shira. But yeah, I when you're at the level where you want to be a showrunner or you want to be an EP, you need representation. To walk into it without is dangerous. But if you can get away with it on any other job other than that, if you can get the
Mm.
jobs on your own, do it and save the money.
Mhm. Yeah, it's like it's something that I feel is like not really talked about a lot in animation, and especially for people who want to like pitch a show, run a show, or like help run a show, is kind of like knowing um like how to approach agents. And like,
Mm.
I guess for you, Jeremiah, it was kind of easier because you already had a studio that was like, we want your show. So now like everybody wants to
Oh
rep you,
yeah,
right?
and I had a week to find representation, so Netflix is like, here's some people we work well with. I
Hmm.
also did my own research and went looking for people, but I started, if I started on Monday, by Wednesday, I was just getting phone calls left and right from agencies and stuff. Hey, can you come down here to,
Wow.
Hollywood for a meeting at 2? Oh, okay, yeah, I'm in the area. I'll go. Hey, can you meet us over here in Beverly Hills? Okay, I'll go. But it was just a lot of. By the time I got out of one meeting with an agency, I was getting a phone call from somebody else, a couple blocks down, and driving to them. So yeah, it was a little it was a little backwards for me. It wasn't the traditional. Hey, can you look at my portfolio and maybe you see something in there that you think I could uh, get a
Mm.
gig somewhere and you could get your percentage off of it. Um, it was very much, oh, they already want him, they already want his show. Let's get him in
They
here now.
they smelled the money.
They did,
Yeah,
which I
because
mean,
that's the thing.
it's
It's
their
like you
job.
have to, right? Yeah, I mean, it's a partnership, so they
Mm-hmm.
want you to bring something to the table, and that's usually with like the artist like working some kind of a job. Um, but I guess like for you, Adam, like how did you get rep the first time? Like, were you, and when were you the one to look for rep, or was it also like a situation kind of like Jeremiah, where like you got into a good position and then you were like, well, maybe I need somebody to help me out with that,
Yeah,
the
and
contracts?
I'm trying to remember. It's actually, I have to think back. Was it before Dogs in Space or after She-Ra that I jumped on to Gotham? Um, I was I was with Gotham before I jumped on Dogs, so I must have jumped
Mm-hmm.
on there either at some point during She-Ra, I guess. And and that's the thing. If they really like it, if you already have a job and you want them to represent you, because then they don't really have to do anything. Um, but I think you do have to be a commodity of some sort
Mm-hmm.
for them to bring you on. They're not just going to be like, I'm a really good artist and I'm looking for representation. They're not going to really care that much. You have to have some kind of cool IP, or you have to basically like already have the job in hand, and you just need someone to sort of handle the contract.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's, same thing with any studio. When you apply, they look at your work and see if you're gonna be of any kind of benefit to the production. These agencies, they'll look at your work, and if they think they can get you work and make that commission, then they'll take you on. If they don't think they don't think they can sell you anywhere, then that's where it kind of ends.
I just kind of wanted to know, Adam, how did you get that job on Shira? Because I heard that DreamWorks is like a place where they like to keep people around and promote them. And do you feel like for you that was you were like kind of going out of your way to move up, or were you just kind of like around doing really well? DreamWorks was like, would love this guy. He should be the one to kind of help out with Shira.
I think it was a few things. One, everyone at DreamWorks was from Nickelodeon, basically, because Mark Taylor was the one that was the head of production at Nickelodeon when I was there working on, Tak and Ni Hao Kailan and Kung Fu Panda and Robot Monster and Dora and the Shorts program, the random cartoons. So I knew Mark really well. So then he went to DreamWorks and eventually he was able to start their TV division when Netflix, gave DreamWorks $5 billion to do 700 hours of content. So, I mean, we talked earlier about, right now being a little bit of the bottom of the wave. That was the top. That was the top of the wave. There were not enough people to help, run shows at that time. So it's a mixture of, they needed a lot of people to run a lot of shows. I kind of interviewed for Boss Baby before She-Ra and
Cool.
just missed that one. But then I met, so it's kind of same with Jeremiah. I met Noelle and we got along really well, and so, kind of like she had met a lot of people also. And so it's kind of the same thing where apparently I'm good in a room. So, I met her and, they decided to, have me run the show with her. But it was, that the wave was cresting and there were a lot of jobs. Mark Taylor, head of DreamWorks TV at the time, knew me, as did his vice president, Monique. So, I was well regarded by that crowd. And then I got along with Noelle. So, yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, that's really, really cool. Like, because it's something also that like I wonder in terms of like moving up in like production roles is there's a part of like sometimes you have to go after the jobs, but there's also a part of like sometimes it's just like the relationships and like sticking around in the studio. And when people have known you for a while at the studio, they're like, oh yeah, like we can, like that person knows kind of what we do in this company and like the overall style we're trying to achieve, and like there's maybe like a little bit of like more like trust that way as well.
I can't emphasize how important it is that it's, it's a cliche, but Hollywood, it's about the people I mean, I went to CalArts and I learned, a little bit about, animation and everything, and it was awesome and it was super fun. But it was really about, that was where I first met my tribe, you met the people that were going into the business also. And now you had like 30, 40 people that were all kind of, heading into the business, and you could talk to them when you're looking for work. And so like building that tribe was really important. I really feel bad for people that have gotten into the business in the last 3 years because it's, it's been remote. And how do you build the tribe, from in that environment? I mean, you do it online. Obviously, that's a lot of it. But it's really hard. I would say you definitely want to be really nice to everybody, except the mean people. You can ignore them.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's so funny. I feel like what was it? I was reading the autobio of Will Smith, and there's I think there's like a moment when he's like his grandma was like, be nice to everybody on your way up because you never know when you're gonna go down. And I was like,
well,
pretty smart.
In animation it's super true, because when I was on Robot Monster, our revisionists were one of the Houghton brothers who does Gravity Falls.
Oh, cool.
Does Gravity Falls. Darren Nefsey, star creator, star in the Power of, I forget now. So she was Aminder, who's also a rock star out there right now. So like 3 of our revisionists all potentially could have been or could be my boss at some point. And I was a director at that time on that. So it really is important to be nice to people. And that, that doesn't just mean for animation. That's everywhere.
Yeah, it's so true. I feel like especially, well, I guess especially this industry, like Hollywood in general, just because it's like it's so, like you said, it's like so people focused. It's like very like the networking and just like the relationships, like just people knowing you, knowing that like what kind of a person you are, like what your sensibilities are, and like and if you're easy to work with.
Yeah, and I a lot of people kind of sort of don't like to network. Network has kind of a bad connotation, but I network with people I like. I'm not going to network
Mhm.
someone who's a jerk or is hard to get along with. So yeah, I
Yeah.
network, but I network with nice people. And I don't think there's anything, I don't, and people know that. I think people feel like, oh, they know that I'm like, networking or, doing this for some reason other than that I want to be their friend. But everyone knows that. We're all in the business together. We know everyone's striving to, work and get a job. Don't be too shy about networking.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great piece of advice, actually. What do you feel like? What's your philosophy on networking, Jeremiah?
My philosophy on networking. Do I have one? Um, what I try to do is people have been more. They've been putting a lot more effort into reaching out to me and really wanting to just ask questions or get some advice and stuff. And for me, I always say yes. So, and I've met a couple of really cool people that way. I met some writers that just once the first season came out, they reached out on LinkedIn and sent me a message and like, hey, I really liked the show. Would you be up for getting coffee and just chatting? And I would do so. And I have a couple of friends now that reached out that way that are in the writing realm of things, and we meet like maybe at least once a month, just to talk scripts and what are you writing, what am I writing or creating, and just spitballing ideas, giving advice like this part, I think you don't need this part and stuff like that. So for me, networking is pretty fun. I'm not the one that usually likes to reach out to people. I have though, but it's not really something I tend to focus too much on. But anytime anyone reaches out to me, I definitely try to make that effort to see them either through Zoom or in person. Some of them have been like in New York, or there was this one aspiring writer in, I think it was Australia, who reached out, and we had to like figure out the time difference and figure out what day to do a Zoom meeting. But for me, it's if you're gonna make the effort and you're gonna want to network and stuff like that, I'm not gonna be a jerk about it. I will make the effort because I remember when I was aspiring to get into this industry, and I would reach out to people, and some of them you wouldn't get a response at all. Of course, this was when the internet wasn't that big yet, and it was a little tricky to find people. But yeah, if people make the effort. I want to be able to give back and offer what I can to them and advice, and if they stick to it, if maybe they're not where they should be artistically or in their writing or something, and I give them the notes, and if they make that effort to make those tweaks or those adjustments, and then they reach out again and I can see they're really trying, those are people that I start to believe in, and I go, okay, this person's gonna make it because they have that grit, they have the resilience, and they're continuing to pursue it. It wasn't so much, hey, can you look at my stuff, and they were just hoping I was gonna say, oh, it's real good, here's a job. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you will get those people where you start to tell them, you should work on your form, or you should work more on your lighting or whatever. You give them the notes, and you could kind of see it in their face, like, oh, like I have to work. I have to do more.
But the subtext of our first meeting, that was what I was saying, Jeremiah. Give me a job. Give me a job.
Give me a job. Give it. But I mean, you get to read the people, and you just know, like, there's just some people that come up and I could just tell, okay, they really just want something, now. They want a job now. They want, some kind of instant gratification now. And,
Mm.
you do the polite, oh, it looks good, cool, just work on this, and keep at it. And then you just kind of have to play it a little colder and just, cut it short.
Mm.
But it's not because, I don't want to talk to them or anything. It's very much just, this is what you need to do, get to it.
Mhm.
No one's going to do it for you. I'm not going to do it for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, you leave it as is, and if they reach out again, then cool. That's what I would like to see in somebody who wants to pursue this as a career.
Yeah, totally. I think this is really great. That's a really great answer, especially for people listening, because networking is always like a little tricky, like because we're all like artists, we're all like awkward and
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
not the best at like social interactions. So I thought that was very insightful.
Oh yeah, because
Like,
like at what is it? Lightbox a couple weeks ago.
oh yeah, did you guys go?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I had a little booth, so people coming over and saying, they love the show, or the show helped them get them through a hard time. Stuff like that was really nice to hear. And
That's crazy. I wish I had known you were there. I also had a table, but yeah, it was just so busy. It was so busy. Like those 3 days were really, really busy.
yeah, it was a little tricky even for me. I don't think I actually walked around to the last day.
Right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then everybody's already sold out. But yeah, you were saying people were like coming up and telling you how much they loved the show and all that.
Yeah, and it was there where I kind of saw the variety of people of, oh, hey man, I worked on this show and I really liked your show. Okay, bye. Or, hey, I really love the show. I really wanted to get into animation. Do you have any advice for me? You got like this array of people at different stages. And it was there where I was just like, where I think I had a little bit more insight to how hard it is to walk up to people and talk. And
Mm.
because I used to be the one, like at Comic-Con or, the CTNs and stuff, where I would walk up to these booths of like Chris Sanders or other people.
Mm.
And you get nervous. You kind of start losing your voice. You have a lot of stuttering happening. You can't even find the words. You couldn't make a proper sentence. And to see that on the other side of people coming up to me and having that kind of nervousness, this is like, kind of puts it into perspective. Like, yeah, it is kind of hard to walk up to somebody.
That was
Even,
what
Mhm.
that was my one panic attack ever was because I wanted to be a cartoonist. I wanted to be Charles Schultz when I was young. Be a comic strip artist, and I met him, or he was at the Cartoon Museum in San Francisco back in the day, and I got within about 15 feet of him, and then I just stopped, and I was just like, what do I say to like this person that was like, it was like a god to me. And it was so funny because I just had this weird look on my face, and he turned his head and looked at me, and I think I must have looked like a stalker or like a mad hitman. And then I just slunk away. Never got to meet him.
because it's pretty funny. What was it? Lightbox the other week. I have these people coming up and saying hi, and I could see them being nervous, and I'm like, oh, that's cute. They're nervous. And then, I look down the rows and I see Chris Sanders' booth, and I've met him a couple times, but I'm sure he doesn't remember me at all. But I was like, oh, I'll go say hi. And even just going to say hi to Chris, even after the show, 2 seasons, seeing how other people come to talk to me and whatnot, and just knowing all of that side of it all, going over and going to talk to him, I still got that. I was like, I know you don't remember me, but you came and you spoke to my class one time at Laguna, and I've talked to you a couple times at your booth at other places, and the whole. I appreciate what you did. I got a show, and it's partly because of the kind of inspiration or motivation that I got from him when he did those visits. But even just going to talk just chit chat. I'm not looking for a job. I'm not looking for advice. I just want to say thank you. That was still, a very nerve wracking moment. And it's just like you gotta have that like patience or that empathy for those people that are still trying to get in, and having that kind of bravery to walk up to you and ask for advice and stuff like that. You gotta give it to them, because it's not an easy thing to do. Even for me walking up to Chris after the show and everything, it was still very much, oh, okay, this is a real thing.
Yeah, that's true. I really agree with that. I feel it's like I don't know, and that's also one of the big reasons why I'm doing this podcast, is that I'm hoping that like everybody who's listening not only can get like a little bit of a window into like animation and stuff, and like hearing this kind of advice of like networking and knowing that it's like okay to like come up to people and talk, and that it's not easy. It's like it takes a little like bravery and courage, and like all right, and it's okay to do it at these events, and to reach out through email and all that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think when at least at my stage in my career, like I'd love the opportunity to be a mentor, with anybody. There's definitely people in the business that I sort of, young people that I track and try and help when I hear that they're looking for work or need some advice, or, I mean, it's sort of, there's a giving back aspect to it, definitely. So yeah, everyone should just reach out to, in animation, we're not like, not that, you're not trying to reach Brad Pitt, and or something, we're just, no one in animation, I feel like, should really feel like they're beyond, being reached out to by anybody.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's going to be like, there's like always kind of like sometimes a level of like different kind of clout depending on like,
sure.
Like how much it's been covered in the press or whatever. But I feel like there's just so many shows, so many different people, and we there's like, like there's not only just like Penward or like Rebecca Sugar out there. There's like so many people that
Right.
that are more accessible and like really excited to share. I also have some questions from the fans. So some of the questions are from our patrons of the show. I think this one's really fun, from Bialin's Bear. Did your creative process change working on your personal work now versus working with other people's work in the past? And if so, how? So it's for both of you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I know Jeremiah is doing a lot of sort of creating right now of shows and ideas, and I've done it over the years, but it can be, it can be challenging, because I get in such a mode of like, being someone who, makes a show for someone, for a studio, for a person, for a team. Sometimes it's challenging to go back and say, oh, wait, what do I really want to do just for me? Why did I get into all this art stuff? Like, what's the most me thing? Because it's probably not going to be anything even related to animation or making money. It's just going to be like, what do you want to do? Like on Friday, I had like an hour or so, ended a little bit early at work, and I was just staring at the drawing pad, and I was just like, I always wanted to do Lord of the Rings sketches just out of my head. And so I was just like, I just did that. And it was so satisfying just to do something that had no meaning beyond just what I wanted to do. So that's kind of where I'm at now. And maybe something like that will inspire something that I could sell or do a graphic novel of or do a show of. But it can be challenging to jump back and forth. But Jeremiah is definitely doing a lot of creating right now.
Yeah. I feel fortunate enough to where, the show ended, and now I have that kind of freedom at the moment to just create and take a breather. So right now it's just working on different story ideas and pitches, and I got a couple of animated ideas for series, and then, some features. And so that's all I've been really doing for the last few months, is just working on new pitches. And getting those ready to take out. And yeah, it's very much just whatever I've learned through the production of the show, has just kind of given me that insight of, okay, let me make sure I tackle this this problem ahead of time. Or, I think maybe the production pipeline this idea I want to do might not be, production friendly. Let me find some kind of a workaround. Or in writing spec scripts for these pitches, it's very much, trying to find a way to, which is silly. I shouldn't have to be doing this at this point, but it's just, you work in it and you just know already what's going to be noted or requested or demanded. And it's like thinking, what's my character count at? How many of these are reused characters for later? In the production, would these characters count as the character count for this episode, or would these characters already be, like the main cast? Would these just count outside of they wouldn't go towards the character count in the script? How many locations am I at? So yeah, the production and running this whole thing for what? It was almost 3 years. Has really kind of put some perspective on the way I create now. So yeah, I would say it has influenced the way I operate now.
Would you say that you're also spending more time writing, or do you feel like you're spending as much time writing, like preparing for these shows, as you were when you were preparing for Dogs in Space?
I would say it's the same amount. If anything, it might be a little bit more, slightly though. But like this, I have this series that I just finished the pitch Bible for, and I've been pitching it for a little over a month now. Normally pitch Bibles are around, 10 pages maybe. Traditionally, Dogs, when I first wrote the pitch Bible, was about 48 pages.
Yeah.
And then once we went into development and we brought in our head writer and Adam was on it, and we really started to hone down on the rules, because it's a sci-fi show, so we have to have all the loopholes and the rules and what's possible, what's not possible, put into place, as far as how many dogs are on this ship, what's the council for, how many people would be on, or how many dogs would be on this council. Are we ever going to go to a research room? Are we good? Do we need to know who the mechanics are of this whole thing? And how do these dogs get around? Do they have transportation? Do they need transportation? Do we even need to go into that? Or do we just rely on jump cuts? If the character already walking to wherever they're going. We fleshed out that pitch Bible. It came out to be around 84 pages at the end.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. But that makes sense. Like post-development, right?
Yeah.
Or like, would you say that makes sense also, Adam?
I'm all for 5-page pitch Bible.
Some can be that. Adventure Time was, their Bible was crude. It was crude. But
yeah, you guys can actually, I'm to the audience, like you guys can actually Google it. It's very easy to find because Fred Seibert put it on Scribd. It's very easy to find. So, but yeah, like so to the audience, like definitely look it up, because there's the Adventure Time Bible is free online, and also Jeremiah mentioned the art of BoJack Horseman, and the pitch Bible is in the art book, so it's really great because there's also this full interview with Raphael and the Tornante producer, and kind of like explaining what they liked about Raphael as a creator, and also kind of all of the elements that were in the Bible. So those are like super valuable documents to like look at, so you have a better idea how to format your pitch Bible for sure. Wow, that's so funny. Yeah, I do agree. Like 5 pages, that would be amazing. But to be able to, yeah.
Jeremiah, what did Netflix? What did they say about your Bible?
Oh, that it's the most thorough pitch Bible, and they use it as examples for development, people in development now. Because of the way we did it, and it was always the information in there was always kind of vital. It wasn't stuff that was just fluff. It wasn't redundant. It was stuff we really did need to know, and we wrote it in a way to where it was for everybody in the studio. writers, the art department, this is what we want to do with the art. This is what we want to do with the episodes and the style of, the percentage of comedy to drama to whatever else. It was just making sure it had the content for everybody. And so, yeah, Netflix, they let us know that that's the pitch Bible that they send out as examples to people to kind of get them, get their heads wrapped around what they would prefer to see in there. I know one thing I stuck in that I'm not sure if I started it or whatnot, but everybody kind of really likes this idea. I think it was 4 pages of just character relationships.
My idea.
Okay. And we stuck it in
but
there.
I read it. I think I read it in one of the pitch Bible books, like BoJack or the Adventure Time art of.
Yeah, and it just went over the idea of. It was more for the writers, I think, but I think the executives really loved it as well because it gave them kind of insight on the dynamics of the show and how these characters work. Because you can make a whole cast of characters and you go, okay, this is a cast of characters I don't really have a connection with or know what they're about. But having the relationships kind of gave you some insight onto every character outside of their just bio, And so I would have Garbage and Stella. I would have an image of them standing next to each other, and then I would write beneath them, Garbage sees Stella in this way and treats Stella this way. And then, the next paragraph, Stella sees Garbage as this and treats Garbage as this. And this is their kind of dynamic, and then I'll move on to maybe Garbage and Ed, Garbage and Loaf, Garbage and Chonies. And then Stella and Loaf, Stella and Ed, Stella and Chonies. And I would just make sure I got all those combinations of them, at least the main cast of 5. Just so everybody knows, okay, Garbage and Chonies is kind of a one-sided thing. Garbage kind of just takes and Chonies gives, but there's not a whole lot of mutual respect in some ways there. Garbage is just gimme, gimme, gimme. Chonies, I care about you, but it's still very much just kind of a self-centered character. Which was fun to do later on in season 2, where Chonies gets kidnapped, and we finally get to see Garbage kind of, spiral out of control emotionally because now Chonies isn't in his life. Which is fun, that's how you get those good character developments. That's how you get the good writing, is from, working with what is there, and then you get those little moments of, turning it on its head and saying, what would happen if Garbage didn't have Chonies there? Would he continue to be like, oh, well, I didn't even notice you were gone? Or would he spiral out of control? We got to see what would happen. So we had that, and I think that's what executives at Atomic and Netflix both kind of praised, was having the relationship chapter. And so that's what I would recommend. One of the things people do in their pitch Bibles is just make sure you have that kind of a chapter where you get to see the character relationships to better understand the dynamics, and more importantly, to let the executives understand the dynamics of the characters.
Yeah, and that also kind of, through the kind of relationships you create, you also kind of show the tone of your show in that way, because like if it's a drama, the relationships are going to be more probably dramatic or serious, but if it's a comedy, it's going to be more lighthearted and fun. And you can kind of sell that through those. That's really smart. That's really great to hear. We have another question from a patron, Joe Benson. If Dogs in Space ever were to get a movie, would you prefer to make it live action or keep it cartoony?
Oh man, I would love a live action. I mean,
oh yeah,
when we went into production, I really did let everybody know, the art department, the writers, and even the animators, because I really try to push away from squash and stretch, because these aren't. I always kind of told them they're not cartoons. They're not. These are real dogs we're sending out. These are real dogs who are just genetically enhanced, and they look a little bubbly, but they have bones. You can't hyperextend the bones. They're gonna snap. You'll break them. So it was very much the writers, art department, animators across the board, it was always pitching it. Treat this as if this was a live action, or if this was reality. If we actually did this and we actually enhanced dogs and we sent them out, how would this actually play out? You know, we're doing it in a comedy format, of course, but let's get as logical and grounded as we possibly can, down to the rules of a council. They would automatically need a council. They would need some kind of a board to dictate and pass judgment and make decisions on behalf of the whole crew. How does captains work? How many people to a crew? Why is there so many exploration ships that go out? You know, what's the purpose of the exploration ships compared to the embark itself? What do all the other dogs on the embark do? It was really getting down to all the logic, even down to like the character or the furniture in the offices. If you notice, whenever we are on the embark itself, my whole thing was, logically, if the world was ending and we have no resources and it was a time crunch and we don't have time to make things look nice and they wanted to send dogs out, what would they do? They would just get desks. They would get, school chairs. They would just load it up with whatever the heck they can find. They're not going to make fancy Star Trek seats. They're not going to do it. They're not going to make fancy desks for these dogs so we can have a cool NASA space station situation. They're just going to plop whatever in there just so they can get by. So even down to that idea was making sure this was real. So if you watch the show and you see any of the furniture in there, it's grounded on it being Earth items. It's not space station desks. It's Earth desks. And that was also my way of making sure that the audience knew what kind of world they came from. They came from our Earth. They weren't just in space. They weren't just a Star Trek fleet. And you knew they came from Earth, but nothing on the Enterprise looked like Earth. You know what I mean? Like, there was nothing in there that made you go, oh, okay, they're from Earth. Like, you never thought of the planet Earth. And so, yeah, for me, it was always treating this as real as we possibly could. So in my head, whenever I read a script, whenever I looked at characters, whenever I looked at the staging or the environments of things, it was always looking at it as if this was a real thing, if this was a real story. So I would, just for giggles, I would really like the idea of doing a live action, though I don't think it would do well. I think it would be like, any other.
I mean,
maybe
I used to be like the biggest fan of The Cat from Space, the Disney movie. Those like direct to VHS. I love those. Or like, what's it called? The one with the cat and the two dogs, and they are
cat and two dogs.
And they're like being dropped off for like a vacation at like somebody's ranch or like a farm, and then the animals think they're being abandoned, so they go on this great journey.
Oh, the Homeward Bound.
Yes, that one. Yeah. I love those movies as a kid. They were my favorite.
Yeah. I mean, those are great, and but it's more to the idea of like Sonic the Hedgehog. But I guess Sonic did well, right, as a live action.
I think so. I mean, there's a second movie, so it did well enough that there was a second movie.
Yeah, I know. I'm wondering if they're gonna do a third, but I guess it would work as a live action. I think there's an audience for that, I suppose.
CGI dogs or dogs chewing on caramel?
I think CG for sure.
Yeah.
Though I wouldn't mind putting a gag in there to where we're making fun of that kind of mouth movement that doesn't really sync up with the words. No. But it would, it'd be one of those meta jokes, a one-off thing. But yeah, I wouldn't mind the idea. If someone presented me with the idea like, hey, if we want to do a movie and we want to do live action, I think I would definitely be in. Regardless if it does good or not. I would just love to see that.
I just want to see him in dog suits. With famous actors. Robert Downey Jr. playing garbage.
What's that one suit. Show? Wilfred?
Oh yeah, are they just in dog suits?
versus people in dog suits,
Oh my gosh, that
A-
sounds so funny.
actors in dog suits. That would be hilarious.
But doing a feature like a 2D feature, I feel like in America is really hard. Like,
Hmm.
anime does it so well and believably and awesome to watch. But man, America with 2D features, they don't get it yet.
No, or at least not anymore. I don't know. I really don't know why that is. It might just be part of the culture as well.
I think it's also, I don't know. I feel like it's just because like now there like all the talent that was animation was like went into boards and like the because it's changed so much now it's all CG. So like I don't know. I've heard from a lot of friends that it's been really hard staffing animators in the US because there isn't really the talent anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. That is kind of like, it was refreshing. I just went to Canada for Loud House, and it's where they animate the show, and it's like, yeah, they're all like animators, and they want to talk about animation, and it's sort of like going back in time when you go to Canada or go to these other countries. Like in Korea, I got to go to Seoul for She-Ra, and it's just they're drawing pencil on paper, or they're animating, just the old school, and it was really fun to go back and see that.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's the thing. It's like, yeah, it's funny because I'm French, so I go back to France sometimes, and I see like there's also just like there's like a little gang of animators, and they're really good, and everybody knows who they are, and they're always just like moving from the production to another. That's like the one that has like, oh, that's actually paying animators in France, because that's also the tricky part, right? Is like if you would have, I mean, I've heard that there's like a couple of animation jobs in Texas. And what's the name? Powerhouse? Is
Oh
that
yeah,
the
I've
name
heard
of the
of it. Yeah,
studio?
yeah.
Yeah, for the one that the studio does Castlevania, and like they have some animators there, but I've definitely had uh friends who were doing flash animation with like Newgrounds and stuff, and they had to move to Canada to pursue animation. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know like people like Brad Bird would, do anything to be able to do a 2D movie again.
Oh yeah. Wow. Wow. Listen to that, Netflix.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
got their own. They got their own problems right now.
I know, right?
they're not thinking of Brad Bird.
I have a question from Instagram that's actually kind of fun because we just started recently sharing the promo pictures of the episodes on Instagram. Originally it was only on Twitter, but now we're starting also on Instagram. And we had a question from Asinonix100. Did you initially plan on Stella being a secondary protagonist, or did it just work out that way? I think that's really fun.
Secondary protagonist. Oh, as far as her getting captaincy and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was always the plan. I liked what they did in Star Trek. The idea of Picard would be in Next Generation. Picard would, oh, I need to go down to the planet. I need to do something. What's his name? Spock. Was it Spock? No, Spock wasn't in Generation, was he?
No.
No.
Data?
Okay, I'm Data. Or whomever else. What was it? Stryker?
Yeah.
You're in charge.
You're losing your nerd cred, Jeremiah.
I can't say anything because I'm looking to get into Star Trek, but I have never watched any of it.
Oh,
so
man. It's a lot to catch up on.
Oh, and
I know, right?
It's dense. With pitching the show, I had to figure out what kind of show this was going to be, what kind of sci-fi show was this going to be. So I knew enough of Star Wars, and I was like, this show's not Star Wars. We're not dealing with a whole lot of that reality. We're more exploring planets and really following a crew. So it kind of had to lean more Star Trek, and I didn't know anything about Star Trek. And so during development, when it was just me working on the pitch Bible and really figuring out how many characters, how many dogs, what kind of spaceship, all that stuff, I watched a lot of Star Trek, and it was dense. It was really tough. I got through the original Star Trek series, which I never knew was canceled. I'm watching it, and all of a sudden there's no more episodes. I'm like, what? Where's the rest? And I was like, oh, okay, they got canceled, and then they came back with Next Generation. And I watched all of that, which was, I think, like seven, I don't know, 7 to 12 seasons or something, and there were like 27 episodes a season, and they were long too. I think they really could have trimmed every episode down to like 10-15 minutes, and you would still get a good story, but a lot of it was just like standing around, a lot of, pauses.
That's really funny because when I was working on the Thundercats the reboot of Thundercats, we were watching the whole show, original show, as we were working, and we were playing the episodes in 2 times speed because everything was very slow at the time. Yeah, you do have those moments when they're just kind of standing around and looking, and they're just like,
Oh, I love the reboot of Thundercats.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, I could talk about it for a long time, but we're still like, it was so cartoony and fun.
Yeah.
So with that, it was very much okay. Here's what I can take away from it, and this is how I would want to do a sci-fi space show. But within Star Trek, it was always somebody taking the chair at any given point. Stryker would then go down and help Picard, and so the next chain in command would be captain, and the next chain of command would be captain. You got to see almost everybody get to sit in that seat at some point. And then someone would leave and go join another ship, or someone would, die, or someone would get lost in space or something, and they would come back later on in a future episode or something. There was always some kind of thing happening. And then around that time as well, I believe Orville just started. Which is Seth MacFarlane. I couldn't remember his name. Seth MacFarlane's show, which he originally pitched to be a Star Trek show, and then they said, no, we're gonna pass. And he's like, screw it, I'm gonna make my own space show anyway then. And he does it in a Star Trek format. To me, it's Star Trek. There is no, it's Star Trek. It's canon to me in some respects. And so it's a great show. And in there as well, they did a whole lot of, characters coming and going. And so for me, I want this show to have that Star Trek vibe. I want to be able to make this show to where it appeals to the Star Trek fans out there, and it feels, familiar to them. So the idea of having characters come and go and seeing that it actually does work. And my show was very much sci-fi meets sitcom. To me, in my head, this show is Star Trek meets Frasier, and just sticking that together. Or Star Trek and The Office, and you stick that together. That's basically what I was trying to do here. And even in comedies like The Office, you had, Michael quit his job. He went to go start another job. Dwight got fired. He went to go work at where did he go? Office Max? Or he went somewhere. He went to another company, and you just had characters disappearing, coming back, adding new characters to the cast. Jim leaving to start a company, or when he left to a different branch altogether, and he wasn't in every episode with the main cast. We were seeing him with these, B characters at a different branch until his character came back. Like you saw, and I had proof. Like, here's the proof in both sci-fi and sitcom comedies that you can have characters move around. And this idea of, you can't break up the cast, you can't, because you'll lose audience, you'll lose people if you do this kind of stuff. It's like, no, these successful things have done it. We're gonna try it as well. So for me, the idea was always going to be that Stella would be captain. There was always ideas of moving Stella to a different ship, moving Happy around as well. the Kira was a good example of what we were able to do, of having a character come on as part of the cast, the main cast, and then having her leave. Her story arc finished, and she got to leave. And then going into season 2, adding Pepper, because now we have Stella as captain, so we need a tactical officer. So adding a new cast member altogether, and doing stuff like that was just always part of the formula. I know I got a lot of squeamish reactions from executives, like, I don't know, we really shouldn't be moving characters around. We shouldn't be introducing new characters to the main cast. I was like, no, we're gonna try it. And I think people like Pepper. I think people, really enjoyed what we did with Kira and having her arc end and having her have that, happy ending that, she didn't know she was able to have. And letting her go home. So, yeah, the idea was always to let Stella evolve, and even, as far as what I planned on doing with future seasons, there's so many things I would want to do as far as having these characters evolve and move on and really develop and seeing where they actually do end up landing at the end.
That's really great. That's such a great answer. It's crazy too to hear like how much thought was already put in at the very beginning. That like you had a lot of the arc. It sounds like you had a lot of the arcs figured out. When you pitched.
Yeah. Happy was gonna have a really big arc. There was even potentials of having Stella get something of like a mini series spin-off with her adventures, and then having her come like a little mini series between seasons, because something would happen, we would see what she was up to while the season continued without her, and then to have her come back and we have context on where she was and what she was doing. Same thing with Happy. And yeah, there was always just a lot of, I had something called a additional content pitch Bible. I wrote, because I did my research, I looked up stuff, and a lot of what I was reading was, hey, when you pitch a show, make it season 1 only. Like, really, your pitch, because none of these executives are going to give you a full series. They're only interested in that first season. They want to know, they don't know if they want more seasons. They're not gonna really commit to that kind of thing. They want to see what season 1 does. So make your pitch Bible really season 1 focused, because that's all they're thinking about right now. So I used that advice. I wrote the pitch Bible. I said, this is the world. This is what they're going to be doing. Here's the arc that I see happening in season 1. And here's where I potentially see characters going later. And that was it. And then I would go into these meetings and, I would get suggestions when I was interviewing for executives and writers. I'd be like, oh, it would be so funny if this happened, or, I kind of see like this happening to this character. And I would go, well, actually, that is going to kind of happen to that character, but it's going to happen like in season 3. Or that's something I want to hold off on because I want to do this with this character, and then this character is going to go over here, and then, and the executives were like, that none of that was in your pitch Bible. It kind of caught them off guard. We don't really know. We didn't know all this stuff. I was like, yeah, there's other content I have, and I have a outline of where I want the characters to go, and how many seasons I would want to tell the story in. And they're like, okay, well, send that over. We'll look at that too. So there was an extra pitch Bible that I had as well that kind of just went into, here's where I see things happening in the future. If we get to do it, cool. So yeah, there was always an end in mind for this show. I still know where this show would end, and where most of the characters would be at the end. But yeah, that's just how I work. I need to know where it's gonna go. Otherwise, you run the risk of writing yourself into a corner and I don't know how this show ends.
Yeah.
And wanting to do it in a shorter lifespan opposed to 9 seasons in a movie or something. It's what the story needs to be as far as length to tell the story correctly and not try to milk it. There was never, I don't ever want to do a show to where I just want more seasons just for the sake of having more seasons. Because then you run the risk of things kind of falling a little short or a little flat, or you could just tell they didn't know where they were going and they had to wrap it up. This was their last season, so they had to tie up all the loose ends.
Right.
Which I think, happened with Steven a little bit, and I think happened more so with Adventure Time, where it was just like you had so many arcs happening by the end, and you had to tell all of them within the last like 1 or 2 episodes, and it was just got a lot of cut tos, and got a lot of montages of where are they now, and it's just too much. Even in some comic books, you got stuff like that. Where
that happens a lot in manga as well, where they get like because it's very similar to TV, where they like kind of keep getting renewed to keep making chapters for their manga, and because it's serialized, it's like a weekly release, and sometimes you can tell that they got the axe, and it's like you got 3 chapters to wrap it up, and it's like oof, they're like in the middle of a big arc, and it's kind of funny because this is just a little bit of a tangent, but especially in these like sports anime or sports manga, where like they're in the middle of like a big tournament and you can tell they got the axe, and they're like, well, our team just loses, and it's kind of interesting because it's something that you expect for the end of a show. But yeah, just a thought of like
it amazes me the variety of anime out there. Like my son watches one that's based around chess, and I'm like,
oh yeah.
Oh, he loves it. And it's just, it just blows my mind what they do cartoons of.
They could do, I think it's because I don't know, maybe this is me being speculative and crazy, but anime works mostly by adapting a very popular manga. So it's basically all IP, which is kind of the direction we're going right now, where it's like, because it's so much harder to pitch an original IP to be directly made into a cartoon, when I feel like cartoons are I don't know. I'm digressing here, but I feel like sometimes cartoons are like usually a big ad. They're a big ad for another product.
Right, sure.
So it's either an ad for like merch, or like if you look at a show like Arcane, it's a big ad for League of Legends. And I feel like for anime, it's like the anime helps boost the sales of the manga or the whichever weekly series, like publishing volume it is, because they have like different, right? They have like the Shonen Jump, they have the Kodansha, and like all different types of, it's like kind of cable but in paper, which is kind of funny,
right,
when to think about. It's crazy to think sometimes that when you get the axe and you're like, oh, I gotta tie up everything, that must be pretty crazy.
Definitely the idea, at least for now, and in this new dynamic shift in animation, anything I pitch now is more treated as if they were just miniseries. So anything I have right now has been written and formatted in a way to where every season would be its own story. That way, if this show doesn't get renewed for any other episode or any more seasons, at least the story was told. If I get renewed for another season, then we do another story arc, and we're following a completely different plot within the context of the world and the characters. You would still have the same characters and whatnot, but it would be a new situation that they find themselves in. That way, you're not risking not getting any more seasons, and then you don't get to finish your story. Because that's kind of the way it works now. You're not guaranteed anything. Especially now that we're so bogged down with numbers and algorithms and all this stuff, where it's just like, there is no gut instincts really anymore. It's very much, it's a numbers game, and that's basically it. If Parks and Rec was a Netflix show, it would have got canceled season 2, and we would have never have gotten this great show, because if anyone who's watched Parks and Rec, that first season was hard to watch. It was hard to watch. Even after you love the show and you go back to rewatch from the beginning, it is brutal trying to get through that first season of Parks and Rec. But you have these broadcasters, and in a time where algorithms weren't really a thing, they relied on gut feelings, instincts, and they kept making a season. Season 3 started getting some traction, season 4, and then it just snowballs into this great masterpiece of a show. But in this new world where we're following numbers and algorithms and stuff, they would have looked at those numbers from season 1 and 2 of Parks and Rec, and they would have said, no, this show's not going to make it. Which is a shame, because now we're living in this world where a lot of these shows have the potential to be these great things, and to try to judge off the numbers of their first seasons is not the greatest mindset, or it's not the greatest strategy in my opinion.
Well, I agree, because I hear a lot of people who are like, oh, you just got to push past season 1 or 2 for a lot of shows.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, we don't really get that opportunity anymore, because you have to be a hit in 15 seconds.
Mm-hmm. And that's not, that's,
yeah.
And then they're wondering why aren't our shows doing good, or, why are we losing subscribers? Well, if you're only letting the shows go for 2 seasons and people know that's your structure, that's part of your structure, is they don't normally finish their shows, then how do you expect people to be loyal and invest in your shows if they're already with that mentality of 70% of their shows don't make it past season 2? Why would I want to get invested in these things? It kind of get my heart broken when I don't get more. So with all that in context, it's just to say that's just the culture, and that's where my mindset is as a creator. And what I would advise other people to do would be to make your show in some kind of a friendly format, to where if this is the only season you got, at least the story had an ending to it, and just have it to where you have in mind the next plot, the next situation for the characters in a following season, that doesn't really have to be told within multiple seasons to get to the end of it. You just play it as practically, in some sense, glorified films where, Shrek 1 really, it wasn't a 2-parter. You didn't have to watch Shrek 2 to get the ending. You know what I mean? Shrek 2 was a completely different story. Shrek 3, different story. So I would advise to try to set up your seasons that way. That way, season ends, you got the ending to that story. You didn't get picked up for more seasons. That's a shame, but at least you're not leaving viewers hanging.
Yeah, honestly, kind of like Buffy. Buffy did a really good job at doing that, having an arc in every season, tying up all the ends of the arc, and then obviously they always ended on a hook that was well, now I need to watch the next season, but it's not a big arc. It's just oh, what is Buffy up to next? But it's very much like that. Each season is its own villain and its own
classic.
Yeah. Oh, just to think we could have had a Buffy animated show, and we never did.
Oh.
We're running a little bit longer on time, so I'm just gonna ask you guys the final question of Creative Block, and you're gonna try to answer it in a sentence. It's tough. It's a big ask. But do you guys ever feel creative block? Do you ever feel you're in an art rut? And if that is the case, what do you do about it? How do you get over it?
For me, I'd say you have to draw through it at the end of the day. I mean, we're all artists, we're all drawers, so I think you need to just keep grabbing your drawing pad and just keep doodling and drawing. But it's also, I think, getting away from the rat race as much as you can, because animation will kind of grind you out and spit you out. So I would say, in one sentence, I would say just keep drawing.
Yeah, I would recommend the same thing, which sounds like the worst kind of advice, because obviously you're in a block. You're stuck. But the remedy is to just do it anyway. So for me, I get stuck a lot, and especially after a show, you get this mentality or this pressure of the next thing I come up with has to be just as good, or stuff like that. So there's a lot of intimidation that already kind of is piled on top of creating or drawing or writing. But it's just doing it. Just start writing a sentence. Start, write a dialogue of a character talking to another character, or just start drawing doodles of the characters you're thinking about, or any of that stuff. Just start it, and with full expectation that you're doing it.
Crap.
It's gonna be crap. It's gonna be the worst crap in the world. But in reading like Creativity Inc. and Bob Iger's book, it's very much fail as often and as fast as you possibly can, because then you can say, okay, this didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work. Now we know what to do, and now I'm on a roll. Now I can move forward and start actually doing the good stuff. But yeah, you have to just, if you're blocked, force yourself to do it, but being kind to yourself and knowing this is going to look terrible, or this is going to read terrible, but I just need to do this. And then you kind of just start snowballing, and then you get the rhythm, and then it's going to start being good again. But yeah, I think me and Adam are in agreement. Just force yourself to do something bad.
That is great. I think this is I think is that the Stephen King advice? I feel like he said something like that, where it's like, yeah, just write, just do it. I think it does really work. Especially when you have a deadline, you just gotta push through.
Yeah, I mean, it's no different from like working out. The idea is just get to the gym. Don't worry about how many sets you're gonna do. Don't worry about how much weight. The hardest part is just getting there. And if you could get there, that's, pat yourself on the back. That's what counts the most. So it's the same mentality. If you just sit and do something, I don't care if it's the nastiest doodle in the world, just do it, and just be happy and applaud yourself that you actually showed up,
Very true. I'm going to take just a second to thank everybody who asked questions and offered drawing prompts. So we had L Draws on Twitter, at Iltzine, at Universe1, and at El Papucho132. Really appreciate all of you guys' questions and prompts. Sorry we didn't get to all of them. It's just that it was such an interesting discussion, and we had so much to cover that I just kind of picked the ones that I thought were gonna move the conversation forward. We also had from Instagram, you can now ask questions and prompts on Instagram. We had at Kitsudans_art, at King Tenta, and Asinonix 100. So thank you guys, and I will say that this is the end of this creative block. Adam and Jeremiah, thank you so much for being our guests and sharing your story. And thanks to our listeners. Follow us on Twitter. It's at Creative Block, creative without the vowels. And on Instagram, which is at creative without the vowels .block, where we ask for drawing prompts and questions to ask our guests. Huge thanks to our editor Clemens for editing the podcast, and Malik for helping us produce the show. If you love the show, then support it on Patreon. Becoming a patron gets you early access to interviews as well as bonus episodes. Click the link in the description of this episode. I've been your host, V. Keep being creative, and I'll see you next week. Bye.